Welcome, everyone, and thanks so much for tuning in to the Magnanimous Collective first episode. I'm your host, Sean Kubota. Let's start off with taking a deep breath into our bellies and letting it go. Oh yeah, dropped in. Well, in this first episode today, we're going to go over what this is, what to expect going forward, and why you might want to keep tuning in, as well as why this is happening, why it's so important right now, and who this podcast is for. We're also going to go over my story, how I've come to be so passionate about these topics and understand them very well as why you should potentially trust me. But ultimately, that's up to you. So let's first start off with defining the word magnanimous, right? So to be magnanimous is to be generous and forgiving to those that have wronged us, especially a rival or someone who's less powerful than us that has wronged us. It's the virtue of being great of mind and heart with a refusal to be petty and a willingness to face danger and to take action for noble purposes. Mic drop, right? Like, what? So it might become your favorite word too, as it's been mine since college, right? Like, when do we find words in the English language that evoke such depth of meaning in a context that's honorable and virtuous and benevolent? Like, what? I found this word when I was in college making a speech to acknowledge my friend Dan Smiley. Shout out to Dan. And it was the funniest speech I've ever made, and I've loved that word ever since. And when I was thinking about what I wanted to express and put out into the world and the types of individuals that I want to commune with and gather with, I was like, that's the word, right? Anyways, the Magnanimous Collective is a collective of these individuals. I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory, right? But specifically, what we're going to be covering in this podcast going forward, some of these videos and podcasts are going to be me speaking and talking about subjects that I just really need to delve into and talk to with you all and express. But we're also going to have individuals on here from all walks of life, from all different types of occupations and careers and life paths, as well as all different levels of financial success and stature, which for me is one of the most poignant and important things, because I love hearing stories of people that have made it, right? That's most of what we hear in podcast day. Like, you have to be at a certain level of success in order to have your opinion or perspective be valid. And honestly, that's absolutely not the case. And I find a lot of richness and a lot of motivation and inspiration in people who maybe are on the ascent to making it, right? Or people who are on the precipice of making that decision and they're finding it out. Because who this podcast is for the individuals who are looking to achieve more, who feel that inkling of like, I am absolutely meant to be more, and I'm absolutely meant to have a legacy and a purpose and to evoke change. And I'm not here to save the world, but I'm here to be purposeful and not just be a cog in the wheel, because as we see with AI and everything else is going on, we are being pushed and forced into a space where we need to stand up. Like, we need to actually be purposeful, because it's not about us being like, oh, there's too much, this technology's too vast, it's too powerful. We can't handle it. We can handle it, right? We're creating the thing, okay? We can handle it if those of us who are feeling called, those of us who are feeling this beyond desire, this calling to be leaders in this new and changing and evolving world, we're needed in order to bring the level of human consciousness up to a place where we are able to wield this power responsibly. That's it. That's all. Right? Nothing to be afraid of. The only thing to be afraid of is if you feel this calling and you're doing nothing about it and you're just stuffing it down with freaking Cheetos and nachos and just running from it. Like, for one, I get it. Like, been there in other ways where I'm like using YouTube or using something like that in order to feed this dopamine because I feel so anxious, like, crap, I'm not doing the thing that I know I need to do, right? Hence the reason for this podcast. Yeah? Because I want to empower and inspire all of you, whoever are feeling this way, that for one, you're not alone, but two, that there's a way, there's a method to the madness, right? Like, there's a reason why you might be feeling these things. And there's also a collective of individuals who are doing the same. And you'll get to see their story of how they've either conquered that and or how they are about to conquer it. And then obviously there will be some individuals here who are, vastly accomplished and super successful. My whole point is that, like, I can meet someone in the market that touches my heart, who's speaking truth, who's taking accountability in the ways in their life that are super important And in the grand scheme of society and life, that might just be, seemingly insignificant. However, each individual who chooses to rise up and ascend from the space of victimhood and take responsibility and accountability of the embodiment of creator, which is our natural and deserved and space of worthiness, our true state of being, anyone who does that is doing something so profound. Anyone who's choosing to become the hero of their own story and not choose the narrative that's being fed to them from society and media and our just societal norms as a whole being glamorized and all this stuff. Anyone who's choosing to say, you know what? I'm trusting my gut. I'm trusting my heart. I'm also trusting my mind because I'm not insane. And I'm choosing to do the thing that I know, beyond a reasonable doubt, beyond rationalization. It's a firm knowing. And so this podcast is for those people who are feeling that way, where they're like, yo, everyone has lost their mind. And you're correct. Like, honestly, you're absolutely correct. People have lost their minds, but they can be found. What is lost can be found, right? And if we stand in finding our own minds and standing firm in that and evoking change through how we show up and how we represent ourselves and how we come to this space of magnanimity, right? And become a collective of magnanimous individuals, that's how we evoke change. Yeah. So, and with that said, once again, we are absolutely powerful. That we'll talk about that much more, but we are so powerful that first we need to yield and wield our own power, right? We need to be able to understand what it means to have discernment of the massive amount of power that we have in creation and destruction, and find that discernment. And then AI, whatever gets thrown at us, like, we're going to be like, oh, we know how to handle this, because we're not being foolish. We're not swept up in a narrative of victimhood, right? So that being said, let's talk about a little bit of my story, and then we'll dive back into these topics and why I'm so passionate about them. Okay, so for one, hi everyone. I'm Sean Kubota. Like I said, once again, some of you may know me. Some of you might be tuning into this later on after these podcasts have been coming out for a while, or maybe you're just finding this for the first time. Either way, just to give you a little bit of background about me, I'm 34 years old, live in Los Angeles, California. I've lived here for most of my life, went to school in Long Beach. But all that being said, I've lived a very interesting, very transformative life. And I have to say that I am so grateful and so blessed and owe all of it to my family. Yeah. And so before I even go into myself, let me talk about my family. Okay. Specifically on my father's side, my grandfather, Mario Kubota, was the son of poor farmers who came from Japan, who literally had nothing. My great-grandfather was adopted. My great-grandmother loved him and saw some heart in him, and she came from a wealthy family, decided to join in with his impoverished self and start a family and just risk it all and come to America. And they lived in Colorado, Welby, Colorado, right? Bought a farm, a small farm, and they were popping out babies. They had 10 kids, right? And the kids helped work the farms. They worked the fields, right? And my grandfather and grandmother also worked a second job as hair stylists, barbers, right? Was a small Japanese community. That was like most of their clients because people didn't want to, deal with Japanese, especially around that time in the 1930s. Yeah. My grandfather was the shortest of all his brothers. I stand at a towering 5'6", 5'5", something like that, right? Hopefully 5'6", right? My grandfather's about the same height. But his tenacity, my grandfather's badass. Let's just start off there. My grandfather's badass. But his tenacity and his willingness and his magnanimity, his this inner calling for him to be like, I'm not going to wait around for someone else to do this. I'm going to take action now. I'm going to do what's needed, right? Was so powerful that he saw my great-grandfather struggling to sell the crops. They were making all these crops, carrots, beets, whatever it is, right? Celery. He'd come back with all the crops, and my grandpa would be like, what the hell's going on? Yeah? He didn't speak that much English. Plus, no one wanted to deal with him, and he didn't know how to negotiate. So they were like, what the hell are we going to do? you know? My grandfather's like 13-year-old Japanese American boy with tattered shoes, all these hand-me-downs. Him and his brothers during wintertime had to sleep in a canvas tent. This is like snowing in Colorado, right? Like wintertime. So that all the girls and his younger brothers could sleep in the house with great grandma and great grandpa, right? Or their mother and father, right? Him and his 3 older brothers slept in a canvas tent in the winters. Can you believe this? Like, come on. You know what I mean? And then he would go out, he would work the fields, and he would go out eventually on behalf of my great grandfather. And, you know, he was just like, all right, you handle this. My grandfather would sell all the crops. He talked to these Caucasian and Italian businessmen and so forth, and they didn't want to do business with him. He's like, hey, look, I got the best vegetables here, okay? Let's work out a deal. And he did it. He became the guy who helped the family and put the family on his back, right? He comes to LA, finds my grandmother. They move over here. He starts a landscaping company, is able to put my father through college to become a dentist, right? Like in 2 generations, like quantum leap, right? And my grandfather bought an apartment building and lived in there and has still lived in it for over 50 years, right? And albeit like his unit is like a full like 3-bedroom house, like, you know, 2,000 square foot apartment, right? However, he chose to make that sacrifice because he knew it would be the most advantageous financial decision for his legacy to come. He could have bought a house. Instead, he has to deal with neighbors, he has to deal with tenants and all these things, blah, blah, blah. He sacrificed his own potential glamorous life so that me and my family could have a step up, right? And my dad's a dentist. My mother's a dentist as well. And my mother's a whole nother story that I'll get into later, but she's a superhero in herself, dealing with rheumatoid arthritis and still taking care of us kids. All that to be said, let's get to me, okay? I grew up sheltered, spoiled brat, and I was always a loving kid. I was a funny kid. And at the same time, like, I didn't know what true struggle was. I didn't know what true suffering was, right? We were a middle-class family. It's not like we were super rich and wealthy. When I say that my parents were dentists, like, being a dentist is hard. It's the number 1 suicide job in the world, right? It's super stressful. You got to deal with clients who don't want to, you know, see you. You got to deal with insurance. People don't pay. And my dad is the most bleeding heart of all people. He gave away so much work and he was so generous and so beloved. And yet the business wasn't doing as good because he was just so generous. And I took on that same archetype or persona. I took on the archetype of the people pleaser. I took on the archetype of the person who let people walk all over them, because it was like, oh, I'll take the higher road. And at times, taking the higher road is absolutely important. Being magnanimous, right? Being forgiving and generous to those that have wronged you and rivals and so forth. However, there's also so much virtue in being able to have boundaries, to make agreements and to uphold them. And I got that from my father and my grandfather, to make agreements and uphold them. However, I still struggled with it, you know, being this spoiled kid. And my dad would say, you don't know how lucky you are. And I didn't. I absolutely didn't. And what's interesting is that throughout life, I put myself into really irresponsible and dangerous and risky situations. Everything from drugs to violence to just doing illegal shit. You know what I mean? And really pushing the limits. And there were so many times in life where I felt God, the universe, creator, spirit, saving me when I'm like, there are people who die doing these types of like, so I'm not going to name, I'm not going to just like air out the laundry on this first episode of the podcast, but I got to be real. There are so many incidences in life where I'm like, wow, okay, I'm humbled by this. I'm grateful for this. And from that, I was able to not only have better relation with humanity as a whole that's suffering, but also like it didn't get to end there. My story didn't get to end there. And because of that, I was also cultivating purpose, because the more relation we have with people, the more we can understand. Like, no one wants to necessarily hear from someone who has no relation to them. But if you're, you know, a person who's done drugs before and who has almost overdosed on drugs before, or who has been, you know, in addiction or whatever it is, those are the type of people that the addicts want to listen to. how they overcame it. Not someone who's like, hey, I know all the stuff that you should do, but I've never done the shit. Like, no one cares, right? And so personally, I feel that there was a drive within me throughout being so sheltered, throughout, I wasn't able to even be outside the house until I was like, I don't know, 15 or something like that, because my parents, and I lived in a good neighborhood, but my parents were like, we don't want you getting kidnapped, It was like that. And I love my parents for that. And, that led and brewed to me doing things behind their back. I just gotta be honest. I've told them some of the stuff. They're like, what? And I feel that there was a drive there, not only to be on a level of survival. I feel like us being able to relate with our peers, that's also a certain space of survival, but also to be able to be relational and to understand and to really fully be able to be empathetic and compassionate to other people too, right? Throughout my life going into college, I went into college, as this, I grew up in LA, West Side, smoke weed every day, like, this archetype of being hard and like, all these things. I was a break dancer in college. I did judo all my life. Let's come back to it all, right? Sean Kubota, I'm an author, speaker, coach. I'm an entrepreneur and real estate investor. I'm also a martial artist, black belt in judo. I'm an Eagle Scout. I'm a jiu-jitsu practitioner, karate practitioner, and I'm also an avid dancer, and I'm a singer and musician, right? All that's been cultivated throughout this life, and I've done so many jobs. Throughout college, I was doing breakdancing, ended up going into the rave scene after being in this. All right, let's back up. Breakdancing was me as a man choosing to express myself in a way that I felt comfortable with, right? In a way that I felt was masculine, in a way that I felt like, oh, if I dance good enough, people will find me impressed. Like, it's just so silly at the end of the day, right? Like, you're a dancer, like, but all that being said, it was the way that I felt comfortable expressing myself through dance without feeling feminine, or someone would think I was gay or this or that or whatever, all these insecure things, right? I ended up finding house dancing and house music, and I was like, whoa, hold on a second. I would just go in there and I'd be grooving. I'd be grooving to the music to the point where I just closed my eyes, and I was like, oh, this is just like me with myself. This is me with God. This is me with spirit. And I would dance so hard that I would get so blissed out that I'd just sit down after dancing really hard and I would just meditate like for an hour, 2 hours, right? That led to me getting into meditation and getting into psychedelics, which opened up a whole nother realm of things. And for a while, I was like an alien, like I was doing deep medicine work for years. And the funny thing is, I thought that everyone who had dreads or everyone who was at these transformational festivals, I was like, oh, they get it. They get it. No, they didn't get it. A lot of them were still dealing with so much shadow, and they hadn't broken through to this space where so much information just floods into so much remembrance of like who you are, how powerful you are, like what you're here and meant to do. And after you leave that experience, being able to integrate it into your life, into the egoic persona of who you are, there's so much there. There's so much to be able to integrate back into your everyday life, as well as how you compose yourself in life. That being said, my 20s, I had an amazing partner who we just recently separated, my partner of 10 years, and she taught me so much, and we grew so much together. And in that space, there was so much there that we knew. There was so much awareness of self and who we are, life after death, all of these topics that most of mainstream consciousness doesn't understand. We got it. We were there. We were fully with that. However, the one thing that we weren't fully in tune with was owning the fullness of the shadow, owning the fullness of ourselves. A lot of people, when they come into this space of healing, right? Like I went into breakdancing and all these things after dealing with a lot of hypermasculinity growing up, my father being this dominant, aggressive figure, who was still super generous, which was an interesting situation. But being just within a society that was like, oh, I grew up with hip hop and rap, and and this hyper masculine persona, and I ended up realizing that wasn't healthy. And so what I did was I went to the opposite polarity, and I feel like a lot of people do that. And I feel like we're seeing that a lot in society right now, where a lot of people are like, this is wrong, this has hurt me, so let's go to the complete opposite polarity. And I lived there for about, I don't know, shy of a decade. I've been in the personal development and conscious community space for over a decade, right? And I had to step away from a lot of it in order to reanalyze and reintegrate and really come to terms with like who I was transforming into post that, right? Because for so long it was, oh, I'm aware that the government is shady and corrupt and all these things, right? Like I'm aware that they're poisoning our food and they're doing these things, that marijuana was illegalized because of business, and there's so much there, like all these conspiracies that are actually true, and I found them in my school library and I did speeches on them and was very much a revolutionary, right? And that's key to understand, is that there's an archetype of the revolutionary and the altruist that so many people get caught up in, and they're like, oh, this is the thing. Being the altruist, this is the final tier. But it's not. The revolutionary and the altruist gets caught up in saviorhood. It gets caught up in this space of like, this is wrong, you hurt us, we're victims. And they lose sight of the true power that they hold, which is that of the creator. The one that is able to create the new iteration of where we're at now, instead of blaming the individuals and trying to punish them, which is an inefficient use of energy. Because for one, the individuals who are already there have already become very powerful. Two, to complain and or to blame or punish them is to basically throw our energy to the wind, right? Like our seeds, our very fertile seeds. It's just like, this is wrong, I'm just throwing my seeds up in the air and I don't care. I'm not going to tend to them. I'm not going to water them. I'm not going to do the hard work that it takes. I just know that you did wrong and I'm going to be mad about it and I'm going to throw a tirade and a tantrum and you should change it. What? And this is why I get so frustrated with these parents who just think that it's, like, oh, just let our, the kids throw a tantrum in the supermarket or in the wherever it is, public space. And I'm just like, you realize your child is yearning for boundaries, right? I've witnessed this with some of my young family members where my family wasn't giving them appropriate boundaries. And then I instated a boundary with them and they glowed. They were like, because guess what? There's love in boundaries. What? Like, yes, there is love there. Like, I'm really good with dogs, okay? You know why? Dogs are super heartfelt. They're super loving. And they have this very clear way of instating boundaries. When the pups are acting up, the mother growls, snarls, snaps at them, bites their ear, takes the back of their neck, puts them down, dominates them. And that's it. She's not bullying them. She's not being mean to them. She's saying, hey, this is a boundary here. Okay? Let's instate this boundary very clearly so that I can just love you to my fullest extent and you never wrong me to a space where I'm then regretting it and then our relationship is ruined. Right? It's very simple. Yeah? But in our world today, what I'm seeing and why I'm so passionate about these topics, and I've lived it, is that not only are we not having boundaries, right? But our boundaries are actually being broken and people are thinking that that's empowering. Like, we're really in a world right now where our government, media, so forth, all of it's really the same. But victimhood's being glamorized. Yeah? It's part of pop culture. And the really interesting thing about this, and let's see if I can say this precisely and correctly in the fewest words possible. There is a narrative. There is a whole agenda, truly, that is being perpetuated that manipulates the masses of people into thinking that taking away their own freedoms and rights is empowering and is their own decision. I could say that better, but that's it. There are people in today's world, you can see it in regards to losing the rights of freedom of speech. You can see it in regards to just losing, appropriate control over what you're child is allowed to do, and what's even commonplace and normalcy is another boundary as well, right? Years ago, we were having, suicide over nudes being leaked. And now it is popular and a part of our culture now to be selling nude photos of your body to as many subscribers as you can, and thinking that doesn't have an impact on your future or the future of your legacy and so forth. And I'm not shaming these people for doing it. I'm not shaming the individuals who are part of these industries in every single facet, because I know people who are a part of these industries, who are on the side of the Andrew Tates as well as the people who provide the content themselves. And I get it, because we're living in a very in-between stage right now where things are going to rapidly change in regards to how we make money and what that system looks like in general, right? And yet this is why these things are happening as well, because we need to really look at what is important, what is valuable, what has merit, Is it the things that are easy and that are, that give away our power? Or is it the stuff that's difficult? Is it the stuff that, is impressive? Is it the stuff that truly, truly fulfills us and is legacy for our generations to come? And can we make that normalcy? Can we come back to center? And the answer is yes. And how we do that starts with us first, right? It starts with having these types of topics, these types of discussions. It has to do with really being forward with our beliefs, but not necessarily imposing them on individuals, but embodying them, and not feeding into the perpetuated beliefs that are, so prevalent today. And one of those specifically, like I'm talking about, is saviorhood, is this supreme altruist, which, back to my story, that's where I was, right? If y'all want to see something, go look up Ptolemek the Messenger, Ptolomek. And tracks are dope. I'll still say my music is dope, and the passion there is just palpable. You know what I mean? And it was I need to save everyone. I need to save people, right? I'm not here to save everyone. What's happening right now with this, I'm not here to save everyone. I can't save everyone. And that endeavor is inaccurate. It's futile. And it's also without balance. However, those who can be inspired, those that can be brought over that precipice of where they're I don't know, can I do this? That's what I'm here for, right? That's why I'm doing this. And I'm doing this for me. I need to let it out somewhere, right? Now, not just in a speech, at a convention or in my book, but, and to be able to have discourse and talk about these things with other individuals and be able to, potentially have my ideas be challenged and to learn and to grow. That's what we're here for. We're not here to be I'm right, I'm supremely right, I know what this is. The one thing I will say is the supreme truth, that is an ultimate truth, that no one can tell me otherwise, though, is that you are ultimately powerful and you are ultimately worthy. And the funny thing is, that's all me saying that you're fucking awesome, and if you want to debate that, fine. But if you're going to try to get mad at me, if you're going to try to be no, you're wrong, I'm a sinner and I'm worthy of less, it's cool. My point still stands, because I'm still saying you're so powerful enough that you can create that reality and believe that. And that's your choice, and that's your free will to create whatever reality you see fit and perceive it, and have all your actions be dictated from that. That's all I'm saying. And that's my goal and my mission, is to be hey, we can choose. Most of the masses probably will choose to be the victim, right? Because that's where we're at right now in human consciousness. However, the first step towards us ascending from that is just even understanding and having it be normalcy and mainstream consensus that we are all creating our reality in every moment as we see fit, and we have that choice. The remembrance that we're creating that, and having that responsibility being brought forth. That's it right there. Because that ultimately is the catalyst for the change, right? Because the change doesn't come from me or anyone else saying, oh, this is how you need to be. And this is, no. No. The change comes from the person understanding in every moment, all the micro decisions, all the thoughts, all the things that seem inconsequential add up to everything that they're experiencing, right? And to have a mainstream consensus where when someone says, oh, this happened to me, we're not like, here, let me give you sympathy because you're being a vampire. Oh, let me give you so much pity, blah, blah. That doesn't mean we can't feel for them. That doesn't mean we can't give them a hug and give them love. But to have it be in black hole, we all know those people who are black holes of just like, oh, life's bad, life's drab, life's this, da, 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 da. It's like, you want to create that? It's like, well, these are the reasons why. I'm like, yeah, and there's all these other reasons why as well, and you're not seeing it. And hey, you want to do that? I honor you in that, right? Like fully. Like the difference is when someone comes to that space and they're not being in gratitude of their situation, you'd be like, I get you. That's what you're choosing. That's what you're choosing. I'm not choosing that though, right? So I don't even have to reflect that to you because I'm not there. And I don't need to validate your existence, nor do you need to validate mine. And I don't need to validate your feelings in order for them to be valid. And if you feel that that is the need, then that's your problem. Right? That's what I'm talking about. That's why I'm here. That's why this is so important to me. Because for so long, I was this guy who was preaching vegan. I was also a vegan for 10 years, right? I was a raw vegan for 3 years, right? Until I found out that Jordan Peterson's daughter, who had rheumatoid arthritis early onset, healed herself by being carnivore, okay? My grandfather, my mom's father, had rheumatoid arthritis since he was like in his 30s. And when I knew him, when I was born, he was bedridden. His hands were huge. His feet were huge. He was bedridden. He could walk around alone, and he was so smart, and he never complained, just like my mom. And he did stocks even from his bed when he could barely write. You trying to use a phone. Like, the dude was magnanimous in his circumstances, and medicine and science just wasn't there for him yet, right? But it was like, man, this dude was taking 30 aspirin a day, ended up destroying his liver, right? Rest in peace to my grandfather, Frank. My mom has been able to take medicine to do this stuff, and she still doesn't complain. And she's a badass. She's an entrepreneur, held a business down, took care of us kids, took us to judo, did all the things, right? She doesn't make excuses, nor did my grandfather. Anyways, back to the rheumatoid thing. Michaela Peterson healed herself from carnivore diet. What that showed me in that moment was that everything that I was preaching, what I was so fervent and sure about, was BS. I'm not saying that being vegan and being, eating chlorella and spirulina and algae all day and water fasting won't cure you, because it has been proven to do that for some people. But what also now exists is that the polarity exists as well. And so we are all individual. We are all entirely our unique makeup. And no one can say, oh, you're Asian. Oh, this must be good for you. No. What? Me and my brother have completely different metabolisms, right? Everyone is different. And because of that, everyone also has free will and sovereign choice. And that is to be honored, right? And when I say honored, that is to be like, oh, wow, okay, you're choosing to do this right now. It's not my duty, responsibility, or even my right to try to save you, right? Like if someone's drowning or something, someone fell off the boat or something, that's different. We're not talking about that. But if someone is choosing to be in self-pity and choosing to suffer needlessly, they're doing that for a reason, right? Whether that's and maybe that concludes their life. There are people in this world who are doing amazing things whose lives conclude unexpectedly. For us to be in the space where we're like, well, we need to save this life. It's like, you can't save all the lives, right? You can't save everyone. And some people not only don't need to be saved, but it's not your right to save them because they haven't asked for it. They have not consented to it, right? We talk about consent all the time, right? Consent for sex, consent to do this, consent to do that. What about consent to let someone suffer? And it's like, oh, but it hurts me, it pains me. Yeah, good, feel it, grieve it, grieve. And this comes to my next point. Into my journey is grieving, right? We cannot. This is a mic dropper here. Big shout out to Sacred Sons. Big shout out to Kale. We cannot be in humility and gratitude without feeling grief. We can feel it. We can be like, oh, I'm so grateful. I'm grateful for this. I'm grateful for that. Yeah, we can taste it, but we cannot fully be immersed and entrenched in gratitude and humility if we're not in grief. Grief is literally the catalyst for us to fully feel into the moment and to be real about everything. Like, think about it. Think of how many times someone, like a family member dies or a friend dies or something like that. It brings everyone together and it brings them closer. Why? Because everyone's being vulnerable. Everyone's in grief. Everyone's finding humility and gratitude. Everyone's realizing, like, whoa, I've been caught up in this narrative of what I thought was valuable, what was worthy. Oh, I've been trying to validate my self-worth in all these ways. I've been trying to do this and that and whatever. And at the end of the day, all I want to do is love the people that I love. All I want to do is be able to connect with the people that I love, right? All I want to do is leave a legacy for the people who I don't even know yet. And there's an opportunity for grief there. Shout out Kale, yeah? There's an opportunity for us to grieve those that we have not met yet, right? And that we'll never be able to meet. Our great, great, great grandchildren, maybe we never get to meet them. Is there an opportunity for grief there? Yes, there is. Why would we do that? I don't know, maybe because it's real. Maybe because what's more real than, worrying about like if my Instagram post got 300 likes or whatever is that the fact that this human life as it develops, and maybe it'll get better, maybe it'll get worse, but you're going to have progeny if you choose to, right? And you've had progeny in the past. You've had ancestors, right? If you're a part of 8 generations, which you are, more than 8 generations back, you have thousands of grandfathers and grandmothers, great, going forward to look back on, who have struggled, who have suffered, who have lived, who have died, who have loved, who have been broken, who have risen above adversity, also that you could be here right now worrying about stupid shit. That's the reality. That's the reality, right? And so all that being said, being able to grieve is not weakness. Being able to grieve is so incredibly necessary. It's not only necessary, it's imminent. And when we hold it back because we're like, oh, I don't want to feel, or oh, it's too intense. Okay, so are we being honest with ourselves then, right? Like, do we truly have at least like, oh, my heart is online? Is it? Are you just thinking about happy shit? Are you thinking about blissed out stuff? A lot of times people in the conscious community or people who end up doing a lot of healing work, whatever, they're like, oh, I'm all light, or I'm like, oh, just I'm all about following my bliss. No, wrong. I did that for over a decade. Wrong. That's wrong. Don't just follow your bliss. If anything, try to be in your bliss as much as possible in the sense of being able to be connected to gratitude while feeling the grief, right? We can't be fully whole if we're not fully embodied. If we have one hand tied behind our back in a self-imposed straitjacket and we're like, oh, I'm being fully myself right now. It's like, get the fuck out of here. No, you're not, right? You have the power of creation in your hand right here to literally unite the world. I'm not saying you're gonna, but you have that power. You have that capacity, right? You also have the capacity to kill a bunch of newborn puppies with your own hands. Like brutal, disgusting, fucked up shit. You're that powerful and it's in you. Everything is in you. That's the thing. You're everything. You're everything. And the thing that makes you you, and the thing that creates your legacy, and the thing that decides your life and dictates all of your stuff is, for one, your lens of perception of who you are, whether you're that or you're not, as well as your discernment, because you know that your actions have consequences and you're a creator and you're creating your life in every moment, whether that's to be normal as fuck or whether that's to be a freaking superhero in your life and have an amazing legacy, or whether it's to believe that you're not worthy of that and to have that be the thing that keeps you from your ultimate destiny and everything that you're meant to do. That's your choice. That's like, that's you. Your choice is everything. And being aware of that choice in every moment, like being online, like, yo, even me right now choosing to take this sip of water, me choosing to fidget in this way, me thinking of this, me bringing up Instagram for a quick second to scroll, all of these decisions, like, what could have happened instead? Could you have been like, you know what? I'm going to tap in and tune in, take a breath, be grateful. I'm going to put on some music and dance. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to do, like, every single decision, every single moment we have an opportunity for all different types of trajectories and pathways that will lead to specific incidences in our life that we'll experience. And we're creating that in every moment, even in the minutia, even in the little micro decisions, even a thought. All those, they're like, oh, it's inconsequential. It's not. It's all happening. It's all happening in real time. It's happening now, and you're creating it right now, right? And there's the potential there for some of us to be like, oh my God, it's so overwhelming. Yeah, okay, sure. Yeah, and you've been doing it your whole life, and you've been doing it in a way that maybe is unconscious, you know? Or subconscious, where in the back of your mind, you're like, I know I'm doing this, but let's just keep testing it. And until someone or something ends up making it so real for me, I'm just going to keep acting like, you know, it's this voice in my head. Well, here you go. It's not. It's real. It's real. And you can choose to do it better, right? One of my favorite analogies and what really brought it forward to me, and I put this in my last book, or my first book ever, which I wrote in 2019 called Victim or Hero, is imagine you are in a coffee shop, right? Imagine you're going into a coffee shop and you just found out that your car got stolen, right? Let's make that more relevant to me because my car got stolen last December. You know, nicest car I've ever had, my Tacoma. Anyways, let's say you go into that coffee shop feeling down and being like, man, everything's against me. Shit sucks. You go up to the thing. She's like, hi, how are you? You're like, I'm all right. I'll get a grande latte, oat milk, no, stevia. That's how I get it. She's like, okay, that'll be $3.95. You're like, all right, here you go. Tap, boom. Put on some AirPods, whatever. Go over in the corner. Don't make eyes with anyone. Just looking at your phone, going on Instagram, being like, fuck these motherfuckers. Right? Just being like in your misery story, your chosen misery story, right? You get your coffee and you go. Sounds pretty normal. Sounds like what a lot of people do. All right? Let's reframe. Let's change it. Let's think of a different scenario. Car gets stolen, right? Instead of that last story, instead of the chosen misery story, the tragedy story, we come into the coffee shop, we're looking around, we're seeing like who's there, right? We see some people, we're like, oh, you just exchanged eyes, with this dude and with this woman, I'm like, wow, they kind of smile back, or they like acknowledge you. You're like, oh, wow, it's good people in here. You go up to the thing, she's like, hi, how are you doing? What would you like? I'm like, I'm doing good. Yeah, it's been an interesting morning, but I'm doing all right. She's like, oh, okay. Like, what happened? Oh, it's crazy. Like, my car got stolen. She's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. You're like, no, it's okay. It's all good. Things are going to be good. Don't worry about it. She's like, wow, you're taking this so well. Like, that's amazing. And it's like, yeah, it's all good. Like, whatever happens, like, I'm sure that something positive is going to happen. Like, I'm good. Like, I'm here breathing. I'm able to be here talking to you. Like, life is good. My family's okay. She's like, wow, that's inspiring, So boom, for one, you just inspire this one person. And then she's like, you know what? This is on the house. This is on me. You're like, what? No, it's okay. She's like, no, really. Then you give her a tip and she's just like, boom. Like, that little magic portal right there has just like transformed her day. It's transformed like society in general. Because when she goes forward, like, not only in her life, but in that day, she's going to be affecting people more palpably, in a great way. And also, she knows, she's been able to see in real time, like, how someone is able to, regardless of how societal norms dictate or tell us to be, you can choose to be different, right? So boom, let's go forward. Dude's waiting for his drink. And, he whips out his phone for a second and he's like, you know what? I don't need to be on this phone. He looks around. He sees the guy there. And they both look at each other. He's like, yo, what's up, man? How you doing? He's like, hey, man, I'm good. I'm just working on this project. He's like, oh yeah, what do you do? It's like, oh, I'm into real estate development. It's like, oh, how interesting. I'm looking for a developer right now. I need some help in regards to doing these, short-term rentals that I'm doing. It's like, oh, interesting. Yeah, we should connect. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Exchange information, Instagram, whatever. Meet a friend, get a good handshake. Might be a potential business opportunity going forward, right? And then he sees the girl in there. She's on her computer, and he's like, oh, I don't know if I want to bother her. She looks up. She smiles. He goes over there and talks to her. He's like, hey, how you doing? What's your name? It's like, oh, I'm Melinda or whatever, blah, blah, blah. It's like, how are you doing? They have a little conversation, they strike it up and they find that there's, little laughter there and giggles and they exchange information and maybe they go out to meet sometime or something like that. I don't know. I'm going too deep in the story. The point is, and then he gets his coffee, he leaves. The point is that story is available, right? That story exists. And the story of the misery story where all of the opportunities are missed also exists. They are both there. They're both available. And they exist in all situations, not just in coffee shops. You know what I mean? And so if we can relate that to life as a whole, what are we missing out on by not choosing to be grateful, by not choosing to be attached to our heart and to be in that grief, in that beautiful grief, and allow for it to make us more grateful, make us more humble, right? What are we missing out on? I think you can put the pieces together and understand. So I'm not exactly sure where we're at on time right here, but I've been going off. I've been going off. And so what I want to do is start to wrap this up and conclude it. But to just cap off my story and to be very clear about why this is happening and why I'm passionate about these topics. Me leaving my partner and separating from my partner was not an easy choice. And we had both shared a lot of the same opinions and perspectives for many years, where society and government and life and our past, and we're both people of color for whatever that's worth, right? Which is not something that is a reason and excuse for us not accomplishing anything, because it didn't stop my father during the times of him during World War II. You know what I mean? It didn't stop my grandmother after she was in the internment camps, for her youth. You know what I mean? And with that being said, I started to recognize that doing personal development work and growing out of that. And for whatever reason, no matter what I tried to do to be there for her and to save her and get her out of that, that wasn't the medicine that she needed. Wasn't it? And I fucking did everything in every way that I could. And it killed me, to recognize that, like, no matter what I did, there was a specific reason that I needed to get out of the equation, because there was medicine there for her that she needed to embark on her own. And it taught me so much. It taught me, like, I literally had a real-time reflection of how I used to be and how I used to think and how most of humanity and how most of the conscious community is thinking. Because even this conscious community who's doing yoga and who's eating clean and who's, caring about the environment and all this stuff, a lot of that community psyop too, in the lens and narrative of victimhood, right? Where they're just blaming, they're not creating, they're not taking accountability for creating their reality in every moment and all these things, and choosing to be defensive and choosing to gather in groupthink and validate their opinions and existence based on how many other people are believing the same thing, instead of being sovereign and being like, this is the ultimate truth, and I don't care if I stand on this rock alone, because I know for a fact that we are this powerful and this worthy, and I will not ever blasphemize your divinity and your worth and your power by saying that you're not powerful, by saying that you didn't in some way create the reality that you're experiencing, that you're complaining about or feeling hurt about or feeling that has ruined everything. It's like, no, at a level you wanted this, you called this in, you literally made it happen, you conjured it, you manufactured it, because there's growth there for you. And if we either choose that things are a blessing or they're a curse, and if you choose to think some things are curses, you're not going to see the blessings, right? Like if you don't see God in all, you won't see God at all. And that's the biggest thing is like, for me, it was very clear. Like you choose in every moment to believe that you don't have to do something, but that you get to do it. And it's a reframe, right? It's a rewiring, a rewriting of the operating system that we call our perspective, our minds, our narratives that we choose to perceive life and go through life with and dictate all of our decisions and actions and so forth. That's all a choice. Yeah. And with that, I had to come to terms with, that for her to learn that lesson, we had to shift things. And I'm so grateful for it all because it taught me everything I'm talking to you about right now. It made it so much more clear, and it made me really understand all of the different ways that this archetype, this narrative, this egoic identity of the narrative lives. It truly breathes. Just as, when we die, what really dies is the ego, the story of the individual. The energy, the life force itself just leaves and it joins in with the collective, force of the universe. Like that's truly what happens, right? But the story dies. The manufactured persona fades away. And that's what makes it valuable. The fact that things are not, the fact that things are finite, the fact that things don't last forever, that's what makes them so valuable. That's what gives us the opportunity for grief. Like, let's put it together, right? If we don't have the opportunity to have things get taken away, we would never feel grief. And it's like, oh, I don't want to feel grief because it's painful. That pain allows you to actually be grateful for it, which is ultimately the highest form of love we can have. Because when you're feeling blissed out and enjoying bliss with other people, that's not the highest form of love. The highest form of love is gratitude. And we can only feel gratitude in a space of grief. Doesn't mean we have to be sobbing to be grateful, but it means that we can feel the pain of it while also feeling the love. And we can feel that richness, and that there's not only power there, but there's clarity. There's clarity of what's truly important and why we're here. Yeah. And that's the moral compass. That's what allows us to be magnanimous. With all that being said, I feel like I've done what I've set out to achieve on this first one. I've just been riffing, y'all. The first part I had, kind of like, okay, I have like a decent structure of how I'm going to go about it. Otherwise, this has been me, just really laying it out there. And you're going to see it go forward in more iterations when I talk to people, and it's going to be fun to talk with them. But I'm also going to have these solo talks where we just really dive in, maybe dissect certain things in society and really deconstruct them. But I feel like this is a really good first episode. I hope you've gained some value from it. I hope that you feel connected to it in some way. And if you do, please share it. Not because I'm like, oh, I need to make this podcast, the biggest thing ever and make a lot of money. Like I'm doing this to support the other stuff that I'm aiming to do, which is me speaking, which is me becoming a public figure, which is making the books and spreading the knowledge. This is a passion, right? This is a project of love and a project of purpose and giving. And so share it with your friends, family, whoever you feel called, that maybe this would provide them with some insight, because that's what we're here to do. All this stuff, all these things about money, blah, 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 we don't take any of that with us, right? The real gold here is our connection to ourselves, the awareness and embodiment of the fullness of ourself, the acceptance of how powerful we are, and owning the responsibility of what it means to wield and have discernment with that power, as well as coming to a space of gratitude through also feeling the grief, right? And honoring every single individual and their choices, right? Their choices to do great and their choices to suffer. And to never, ever feel like you have to validate how they're feeling when you're feeling otherwise, right? Because if you feel that they're ultimately powerful and you're like, hey, bro, sis, like, I feel you, and I don't agree, because you're making this up right now, and I love you, and I know that you're so powerful, and you're creating this, and for whatever reason you're wanting to experience this, like, I honor you in that. And if you want help, I got you. And I'm also here to honor your decisions. And if you're making this happen, like, who am I to stop you, right? There's a silver lining here that I don't know. You know at the bottom of your soul, but that's for you to know. Yeah. So anyways, that's what we're here to do. Thank you all so much for tuning in. This feels good. And yeah, I appreciate you sharing this if you can, or if you do, because I know you can. And I'll see you on the next episode. I also want to say thank you to my pup, Layla. Layla, come here, babes. Come here, babes. Come here. Come on the camera. Come here. Layla, come. Layla, come. I'm going to bring her on. Come here. Come on the camera. Chris in the first episode, babes. Come here. Get on the first episode. This little girl's been being so patient. She hasn't made any noise. And she's been being a sweetheart. Thanks for being on the first one and for holding the space. My sweet babe. Say bye. Love you all. Thanks so much. Take care. Have a blessed day, and we'll talk to you soon.